We're going to run through the seated hamstring curl, which is one of my favorite accessory lifts for a number of reasons. And we're going to run you through a whole bunch of different setup ideas, programming strategies, and execution changes that you can make depending on your client's goals and depending on why this is in the program for your clients. Obviously, it's a seated hamstring curl, so it's really just targeting the hamstrings. However, once you start to understand all of these different programming exposures and how the strength, hypertrophy, and skill kind of outcomes are so interconnected, this machine here ticks a lot of boxes, especially in the sensory end of feeling good trunk position, controlling your pelvis while using your legs, and learning how to get active tension on, or active mid-range tension really, on the hamstrings themselves. So more often than not, when people set this thing up, they'll just sit here normally, they'll probably push into the handles and just go through the lift as they do. I can guarantee that you've probably seen clients though, as they start to fatigue, they start to want to drive their system into extension and drive their mass forward. Their head starts to lift back, their back starts to come off the pad, and ultimately we start to see a lot of global changes to achieve the exercise rather than just very localized hamstring load that's happening. So they're going to be most of the time the things that we're trying to coach clients away from, minimizing as much trunk demand as possible so we can maximize load and tension onto the hamstring. So the easiest fix for this is actually just getting them to shift back a little bit. So it might look like, for this machine, what we have, we cue clients to kind of like hug the handles. I personally like to grab on top of this with my right arm, something like that. And then if James goes through a few reps there, it's significantly harder for him to extend here. Just by nature of the flexed position and driving the center of mass backwards, it allows you to hold the shape significantly easier and actually get more tension onto the hamstrings, which is what we're looking for in the exercise. Another couple of really key things that you can do with the seated hamstring curl is start to actually piece the exercise and flavor in some of the feelings and sensory stuff that we're looking for things like squatting and deadlifting. So if you've got a client who's learning to brace and shift their rib cage back in space, you can use this exercise to feel that. And that would look like that same position. Maybe this time with a little bit of a cue for an exhale and find the ribs down. Do you feel that ab tension? Once you've got that ab tension, you hold that whilst you go through the exercise. And you can actually start to move through the exercise with that awareness of the rib cage position. And all of a sudden, this becomes a bracing skill drill that will help you for your squat exposures or your deadlift exposures. And if you set this thing up right, it's just another opportunity in the week for them to feel and experience and get better at that skill. Because ultimately, all of these movement outcomes are just little skills that need to be challenged in different ways. In the same way you would shoot a jump shot from a variety of areas in the court with different defenders and different steps in, these skills are no different. You can experience and play with them everywhere in the program under different loads, different intensities, different rep ranges, different loading positions, and all of those little things are teaching the brain how to actually coordinate, in this case, the rib cage in position. The next really important thing that the seated hamstring curl can teach you is, if you stand up, if you've got clients who live in extension and they're dumped, like extreme extension, you'll have a huge lordosis. These are the people that are going to struggle to find any hip internal rotation. When they breathe, it's all happening at the front lower rib cage or up in the neck and all of this. And ultimately all we've got is a position where the mass has been driven as far forward as possible. This is very common for like heavy powerlifting and strong powerlifters to end up in this position. It's a performance position. It's where force is produced and where high-end strength is expressed. But ultimately, this position can lead to some typical problems that people feel. They feel that their ankles lack dorsiflexion. They feel pinching at the front of their hips. They feel a lot of tension in their low back and their erectors. They feel a lot of tension up in their neck. And ultimately, it's no surprise why they feel those things when we just look at the skeletal position here, especially if we're loading this regularly with high frequency bench press, squats, and deadlifts. So for these types of clients, teaching them that pelvic control, and we've gone through a bunch of drills like the supine hip rolling, just rolling forward and back, the planks, the dead bugs and all of those things, are ultimately just trying to teach them to feel this control of their pelvis in space and to get away from that extended posture of anterior tilt and towards a more quote unquote neutral, I hate the term, but towards a more midline, maybe even a little bit of a posterior tilt to help them brace and do all of those things. So for those clients that really are extended, you'll notice a little theme in these videos. The two most important things we're looking for is the abs, especially the obliques to pull the ribs down, and then the hamstrings actually tucking the pelvis underneath them. We don't want glutes because glutes push forward in space and just actually drive a center of mass forward. What we're looking for is obliques on the front side and hamstrings on the back side to tuck. And this exercise is one of the best places to feel this active mid-range tucking of the pelvis. So if you go back in, and for this sort of person, I'm probably not going to flex them too aggressively. I'm going to try to piece together that oblique feeling and a little bit of a pelvis-driven tuck. And if they can hold that with their abs as they go through the lift, you'll notice that we're no longer just passively wrapping ourselves around and holding that flex shape. Now it's much more of an active position. And again, you could hammer your hamstring accessory like this, but it's giving the brain of that client the awareness of the pelvic position and the active hamstring position that we're looking for. And if you tick all of those things, what you'll probably get is a significant hamstring pump doing this. And the reason is because it's active mid-range tension. When we set this thing up and demand the hamstrings to flex the knee and control the eccentric, we're actually just forcing so much active tension into the hamstring. Anytime we start to get aggressive with momentum or a huge orientational shift at the rib cage, all of that stuff reduces the demand of hamstring tension. When we set this thing up and hold our pelvic position with a good ab sort of tension, all of that load goes to the hamstrings, and in this exercise, it's all active, it's all mid-range, it's all contraction, it's all byproduct driven, it's burn, it's pump, you can push high reps, you can push lots of sets, and you'll probably find clients will start to experience a hamstring training load they haven't had before, because all of their other training is this extended eccentric length of things like RDLs and stiff-legged deadlifts and all of that sort of stuff. Or they completely bypass it and just go to like a hip thrust. So it offers a lot of benefits, and we can set it up in a number of different ways to challenge different things and piece the program together for your clients. So if you have any questions, you can drop them straight down below in the video. Otherwise, for the monthly Q&A, this is something I use a lot of, so I'm keen to keep chatting about it if you guys are. And ultimately, I hope you got something from the video, and I'll see you next week.